Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you're all having a good week. So, we're coming to the end of the 7th week of Foundations, and every Sunday, what I like to do is talk about my meta breakers of the week in Best of One. And so, all of these meta breakers have at least a 60% win rate and 50 matches, and were successfully piloted into Mythic. And I just wanted to say thank you to my YouTube members. It's the most I've ever had. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Brand MX, welcome. Jay Campos, thanks for resubbing, for the continued support. Bergie Michi 2007, Naaman, and Strider Rules, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. So, I have to admit, though, that this week we're going to cheat a little bit. I've been waiting for the Collector's Cage deck to make it into my criteria, make it into the meta review, and it's going too slowly. No one's done it successfully yet, but I think they will soon in the future because the Collector's Cage deck has been doing very well in the tournament scene. Maybe not specifically the standard challenge, because that's what I use for the best of 3 meta review. But it's been performing quite well, and I think we're going to start seeing it pop up into the ladder a little bit more. So this week I decided to cover it despite it not meeting my criteria. So this was Collector's Cage by Majira. Went 16-4 for an 80% win rate into Mythic. And we see a couple of changes from the lists that we usually see in Best of 3. So usually there's like a single copy of the Boonbringer Valkyrie that's hanging out either in the main or in the sideboard. Typical kind of sideboard card in Best of 3 that was dropped from this list. More importantly, though, I think we're dropping the Sky Knight Squire, which was the Foundations card that's the little 1/1 for 2, 1 and a white that gets bigger every time that you're playing another creature. And then once it has 3 counters on it, it gets flying. I think that's kind of missed in this build, personally. Just because the point of this deck is kind of to flood the board, as well as a counters sub-theme around Collector's Cage. So Collector's Cage is the real like bread and butter to getting this strategy to work. Because of the go wide strategy, being able to manipulate the like 1 power here, 1 power here on the Llanowar Elves, 2 power on the Patchwork Recruit, and so you can kind of get out your you can manipulate your stat blocks to be able to get the Hideaway 5 on the Collector's Cage quite easily in this strategy. And so if you have the Sky Knight, you are also able to tweak the power by figuring out when to play your creatures before or with the Collector's Cage, and I think is a useful tool that maybe you should consider including back into this list. Because this by no means is this archetype figured out, right? It's still being explored in Best of 3, trying to find the best build. So we'll definitely keep our eyes on it as it continues into the later part of Foundations. The other card that we've seen a lot in this archetype is Warren Warleader, something that gives the +1/+1 to everything, along with the Sanguine Evangelist. So it's a very common inclusion in the Celestia Rabbits builds, which this is similar to, but not exactly the same, right? Dropping the Knight Errant of Eos for more of the kind of top end of like the Overlord of the Mistmoors. And also running Get Lost over Soul Partition. I think Soul Partition is favored in some of the lists that I've seen over the Get Lost, right? So they both have pros and cons, different matchups where where Get Lost is advantaged over the Soul Partition and vice versa, right? So that one I feel is like a little bit more of just a personal tech choice. Malira, usually we see it 2 copies, it's down to 1 here. Toby as well. Salvager, we usually see it 3, but this one's brought up to 4. So some variations like Tolsimir, Midnight's Light, don't usually see this one included in the archetype, but it fits the general theme of just kind of like Celestia counters and tokens, right? So yeah, really curious to check it out. I think we'll, like I mentioned, I think we'll see more of this deck, so that's why I wanted to cover it first. And this one's running Mirix instead of Fountain Port. I think Fountain Port has a better natural synergy with the tokens in the deck, but really, this one creating more tokens, the Fountain Port giving you more draw, right? This strategy in general is relatively well set to in the best of one meta, because the best of one meta is predominantly mono red, Boros auras, and mono black, and this deck is weak to sweepers. So if we see more of like Azorius Control and Temporary Lockdown kind of come in to play, this deck could struggle a little bit more. I imagine it plays out similarly to Celestia Rabbits, but again, we'll you know, we'll know more as the deck grows in popularity. And since it's Sunday morning, I gotta get my cup of coffee. So, Mono Blue is another one that, excuse me, my voice cracked. Mono Blue is another one that I think you should keep your eyes on. It's not necessarily better than just the Dimir version, but you're seeing it a little bit more, right? So this one was Mono Blue Flash by year, went 141 and 71 for a 67% win rate. Notably, this was a full bronze to mythic, so its win rate might be a little bit inflated by the bronze to platinum part of the climb. But still an interesting strategy. So basically with this one, you've got the early flyers like the Spyglass Siren and the Fairy Mastermind, which help you get in for your evasive damage with the Enduring Curiosity. Less so with the ninjutsuing in the Dimir version of Kaido, but we've got the Foundations version of, I guess they're both Foundations, but we have the Kaido Planeswalker. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on it. So this is each time too, right? So it's not just one creature. The loyalty can grow exponentially with the more flyers that you're attacking in with. And so Kaido can get out of control. Sleep Cursed Fairy and the Spell Stutter with the Fairy Mastermind, like there's a little bit of a fairy synergy. Fabloom Trick as well, which has been a pretty impressive tempo card in Dimir midrange. We've talked about it in my best of 3 meta review as well. And we've got the Soulstone Sanctuary, which also can count as a fairy, so a fair amount of fairies if you want there to be. But it also can count as a ninja, right? And well, I guess that's less important with this version because this one doesn't pump all of the ninjas. But anyway. And then into the Floodmaw, really the only interaction outside of the Flood Pits Drowner and the Spell Stutters to disrupt your opponent's play. But a typical tempo strategy, trying to win the game quickly and disrupt your opponent. And I also just wanted to say real quickly, thank you so much, everybody, for the wonderful comments. I mentioned yesterday, or last week, during the Best of 1, Best of 3 meta review, that I was dealing with a problematic person, right? And the amount of just absolutely wonderful supporting comments that came in really took me by surprise, right? I was over like 50 comments of just, you know, you're doing a great job, thanks, keep it up. So I just thank you for that. That was really lifted my spirits quite a bit. So the third list here is Azorius Control by Donut Beast, and we usually talk about Azorius Control in the meta breakers as opposed to in the meta review, because for whatever reason people they've kind of given up on Azorius Control after we lost the Memory Deluge and the Wandering Emperor, right? And it's definitely not as tier 1 top of the meta as it used to be after losing those tools, but it's still a very viable option, and I think it's a really good one for doing like the standard challenges, right? If you're like grinding gems and things like that, because you can build it to be kind of a coin flip against like mono red, and then highly favored against mono black and Boros auras. And I think those three represent a good chunk of the decks that you're going to experience in those kind of things, right? So keep that in mind. You might want to check out this Azorius Control if you're looking for something. It's a little bit of a grindy deck, right? So with 94 and 46 for a 67% win rate, you can definitely you can grind this all the way up into the top ranks of Mythic. And this one is not doing anything particularly new from what we've talked about in the past. So we've got 3 copies of Farsight Ritual and 1 copy of Spellgyre. Usually we have some form of 4 or so card draws. This one is not running the Deduce, which can give you the multiple rounds of drawing cards. but does have a fair amount of anti-red red tech, right? So we've got the Elspeth Smite, Authority of the Consuls completely negates things like Urbresk's Forge. Kutzel's Flanker gives us Graveyard Hate while also giving us life gain and stabilization. Get Lost and Soul Partition. Like I tend to favor the Soul Partition more than the Get Losts, but that's just me personally. One negate and the three no more lies, as well as the 4 3 steps ahead, giving you the kind of the counterspell core. Hornblock Whale also helps out against the early aggression and aggro decks, being able to bounce something on top of their library. And then, of course, we have the sweepers, right? So temporary lockdown against Boros Auras, Day of Judgment, and Sunfall for more of the mid-range decks. And then Ghost Vacuum also gives us a little bit of hate. Excuse me, I think I'm fighting a cold. Sorry. There's been a little flu bug going around, so hopefully I don't have it. But the Ghost Vacuum allows you to not only just hate on their graveyard when you think of like your typical... I mentioned this in the Best of 3 meta review a lot too, right? It's a good answer for sticky threats, like the Enduring cards, Enduring Vitality, and Enduring Curiosity. They keep coming back, right? So if it touches the graveyard and then comes back, you can use the Ghost Vacuum to get rid of it entirely, and then later gives you a win condition, right? Being able to create your own little 1/1 copy of Enduring Curiosity can be a way that this deck actually ends up winning. It's a very grindy strategy, typically utilizing manlands too, so the Fountain Port and the Restless Anchorage are definitely a way that this deck, seals the deal. And we're going to have to keep it a little bit shorter this week, just because it is the beginning of the new season climb. Not, we don't have a full week, really, even of the full new season. So this one I thought was kind of an interesting build worth talking about. So this one was Hail Hydra by 8-bit and went 40 and 19 for a 68% win rate. Excuse me. And note, this one was also a strategy that take it with a grain of salt, because it's early on in the season, and this one looked like there might have been some potentially low MMR. Not necessarily on purpose, but just might have been a new account. You can kind of look at it just based off of the matchups and whatnot, right? So this had some less than... this one didn't have the typical matchups on its climb into Mythic. So, might have just been luck, though, too. You never know. So, this one, mono green, right? Mono green Stompy ramp with the Tolly thrown in there for fun. Green ramp synergies, right? So, you've got the Llanowar Elves. You can cast the Atali off of, the treasure that's created from the Gold Vein Hydra. But, let's see. So, we've got the Ordeal of Nylea. Search your land for 2 basic land cards, put them into play tapped, and so this kind of gives you the ramp, and then also synergizes with the +1/+1 counters. This one's also not one that we see very often, so a kind of a new exploration might be worth checking out. Awaken the Woods, on the other hand, we've seen quite a bit, taking advantage of any time that you have a large amount of mana. You can then transfer that into a large amount of 1/1 land creature tokens, which then gives you even more mana. The Hydra, whenever a land enters, you get the double the counters, which makes the Evolving Wilds make more sense for the double landfall triggers. Invasion of Zendikar, in addition to the Overlord of the Hauntwoods. Usually you see one or the other, like in Domain, and so this one running both to really just ramp into... I guess that's another way that we can cast the Atali as well, right? The Vaultborn Tyrant giving us some stabilization once you get to that point where you're just dropping power 4 or greater every turn. Gaining 3 life and drawing your card is a way to just stabilize against the mono red strategies. And then just a good old 6/6 trample here. Whenever a land you control enters, create a 4/4 beast creature token. So again, leaning further on to the additional landfalls. So I think when you're playing this deck, you don't want to thin your deck on turn 1. You'd rather hold the Evolving Wilds for later down the curve to get the additional, the double triggers, right? And Garrick's Uprising also giving us the card draw off of the power 4 or greater. So you can draw into additional gas. And then Whale Ray Brawler, we've seen this one throughout the weeks as well too, like since Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Anytime that you're playing a Power Matters deck, right, with high power creatures, this then just basically doubling their power, and then also synergizing with additional counter synergies just in the deck, which is why you've got the Bristly Bill, right? So it feels really close to like an actual I don't want to say this in a mean way, right? It's a well thought out strategy. I think there's a couple of tweaks that it might need to go through for it to finally get into like a mainstream tier 1 kind of state. But 40 and 19 is a very impressive climb into Mythic anyway. And so, I'm curious and kind of want to check it out. So I hope you do as well. And with that, though, thank you for being a part of the community. Again, thank you for those who can help me monetarily. I do appreciate the support. And tomorrow I'll be talking about my Best of 1, Best of 3 meta review, as usual, as we get into Week 8 of Foundations. And then on Tuesday, we'll have the Community Deck Tech. So we haven't done that one in a while. If you have a deck or something that you would like me to take a look at and give you my feedback, as well as get feedback from the community, post your deck list in the community tab. Look for the bat signal, right? Look for the magic card that says Community Deck Tech. So with that, thank you for listening to my ramblings, and have a wonderful week. Good luck with your matches and your RCQs and climbing the ladder. And yeah, take care, everybody.